Welcome to Election Night in America 2022 and our full coverage of this year's Senate elections. We have 35 races on the ballot that will decide whether or not Democrats will maintain the majority that they won in 2020. The Republicans need just one seat to take back control, and tonight we'll cover every single race and keep you guys updated as the Senate elections get underway. Our election night coverage officially begins now at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where polls are closing statewide in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vermont. In Indiana, Todd Young is the projected winner, defeating Thomas McDermott Jr. We also have a Republican win in Kentucky. Rand Paul, the projected winner, winning re-election to a second term against Charles Booker. And Tim Scott will also be returning to Washington, defeating Kearsarge Matthews in South Carolina. Finally, in Vermont, Peter Welch is the projected winner. He will succeed Patrick Leahy, who has served 7 terms in the upper chamber of Congress. And so this will give Democrats 37 seats, Republicans 32. We still have 31 races left to call. And our map currently features a whole ton of gray, but it will start to get filled in pretty quickly as the night continues. And of course, tonight Republicans must pick up at least one Democratic-held seat if they want to take back the majority after just 2 years of Democratic control. In Georgia, the race is currently too early to call. We cannot make a projection in the election between incumbent Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Polls closed at 7 p.m., but currently we cannot make a projection in the Peach State Senate election. A majority is needed, and currently it is unlikely that either candidate will get to 50%, as we do have a strong Libertarian candidate also in the race. We are now approaching our 7:30 p.m. poll closings, but all eyes are still on Georgia, as the state gave Democrats the Senate majority in 2020 with the victories of both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. But this year, if Herschel Walker wins, the state could do the same for Republicans, giving them their 51st Senate seat. The governor election is very likely to go to Brian Kemp, but the Senate race is still a pure toss-up. However, we do have some results right now to show you from the Peach State and some other races in which we've seen polls partially close as well. In Georgia, Raphael Warnock currently maintains a very strong lead against Herschel Walker with 64.7% of the votes that have been counted so far. We have 5% of the estimated vote in. However, most of these votes are mail-in ballots, which do tend to favor Democrats pretty heavily. We do expect the numbers to go up for Herschel Walker as more Election Day votes are counted. In Florida, some partial poll closings have occurred in the Panhandle, and with 2% of the estimated votes in, Marco Rubio has a strong lead against Representative Val Demings. And finally, in New Hampshire, we have just 48 votes that have been counted, 27 for Hassan, 21 for Bolduc, a 6-point lead right now for the incumbent Democratic senator, but not even 1% of the total votes have been counted. It is now 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and polls are closing statewide in North Carolina and Ohio, where we have 2 incumbent Republicans retiring after their terms in early 2023. Richard Burr in North Carolina and Rob Portman in Ohio will be leaving the Senate early next year, which means that we will have 2 new United States senators elected from both of these elections tonight. However, in the race in North Carolina, we currently cannot make a projection for the election between Cheri Beasley and Ted Budd. The race is currently too early to call, as the 2 candidates spar for the seat currently held by Richard Burr. Cheri Beasley is the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, while Ted Budd has served in the House for a number of years representing North Carolina, and he did win the Republican nomination with the endorsement of former President Trump. In Ohio, we have another Trump endorsee on the ballot. This time it's J.D. Vance, who is running against Tim Ryan, the 10-term congressman. And the race in Ohio is especially competitive, as even the Republicans have taken a strong edge in the Buckeye State over the last decade. Democrats were still able to win a Senate seat held by Sherrod Brown in 2018. And so with our second poll closings of the night, the Senate still stands at 37-32, as we cannot make a projection for any of the races in North Carolina or Ohio at this hour. And so looking at our map, we have 3 white states, again, Ohio, North Carolina, and then Georgia, with a whole ton of gray left. We've only made 4 projections out of the 7 states where polls have closed so far. We've now received preliminary numbers from Ohio and North Carolina just moments before polls close at 8 o'clock. We have major races to project at this hour, but the numbers in Ohio and North Carolina so far are looking good for Democrats, as most of the votes that have been counted so far were either mailed in or cast early. We do also have some updated numbers from Georgia, where Raphael Warnock continues to lead over Herschel Walker with 21% of the vote now in. Warnock maintains a strong lead against Walker, looking good for Democrats here in the Peach State. Democrats are also leading in North Carolina. Sherry Beasley doing better than expected with a third of the vote in. Beasley is almost at a majority, while in the Buckeye State, Tim Ryan is currently at a majority of the votes that have been counted so far. Vance is behind by 5 points with 18% of the estimated votes in. We also have more numbers from the Sunshine State of Florida. Marco Rubio maintains his lead against Val Demings, as most of the votes in the Panhandle have been counted. Although polls have not fully closed in Florida yet, they will in just a couple of moments though, at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And so currently Democrats are leading in 2 Republican Senate seats, those of course being North Carolina and Ohio. And again, Republicans need to pick up just 1 Democratic seat if they want to take back control. We've now hit the top of the hour at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, which means polls are closing in Alabama, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania, making this the largest poll closing of the night, as we do have 2 races in Oklahoma. One of them is to fill the vacancy that will be left by Jim Inhofe next year, and that is the special election that is occurring alongside the regular election, where James Lankford is running for re-election. So we do have quite a few projections to make. In Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal is the projected winner, winning re-election against Leora Levy. In Illinois, Tammy Duckworth also wins a second term, defeating Kathy Salvi. In the state of Maryland, Chris Van Hollen is the projected winner. He'll return to Washington, defeating Chris Chaffee. While for Republicans, Katie Britt has been elected to succeed Richard Shelby, and she defeats Will Boyd to win her first 6-year term. In Oklahoma, James Lankford is the projected winner of the regular Oklahoma Senate election, while in the special election, Mark Wayne Mullen is the projected winner, defeating Kendra Horn. And so with these projections, Democrats still lead with 40 seats, Republicans at 35. 25 seats remain to be called, and there is the map. We're seeing some more color in the middle, and also some more states filled in to the east as well, but we still have a whole ton of states left to call, and currently it is still a toss-up as to which party will actually win the majority tonight. However, there are a few races that we cannot call yet. The first one is Florida. We will be able to make a projection very soon, but we do want to wait a little bit longer to be fully sure of our projection, but currently Florida is too early to call. In Missouri, Trudy Bush Valentine and Eric Schmidt are running for the seat held by Roy Blunt. He will be retiring next year, but this race is still too early to call. In New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, the incumbent Democrat, is running for re-election to a second term. She's being challenged by Dawn Bolduc. This is a very close race and is too early to call. And finally, in the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, who suffered a stroke just 5 days before the Democratic primary in the summer, he's still recovering, and he is running in a very tight election against Mehmet Oz, one of the closest ones of the year. So of course, Pennsylvania is also too early to call at this hour. As the night has gone on, it's become increasingly clear that the Senate majority is going to be decided by some very close races. In New Hampshire, this race was not even that close until just a couple of days ago, and in Ohio, Tim Ryan is doing better than expected against J.D. Vance. It's now 8:30 on the East Coast, and election night continues. We have a poll closing from Arkansas and another projection that we have to make at this hour as well. We're now finally able to make a projection in Florida, where Marco Rubio is the projected winner against Val Demings and will win re-election to a third term, winning by a 10-point margin against the Democratic representative. With 90% of the estimated votes in, Marco Rubio looks like he will win his re-election a second time, defeating Val Demings. We also can make a projection in Arkansas. John Boozin will defeat Natalie James to win his re-election to a second term. And so with these two Republican projections, the GOP now has 37 Senate seats, the Democrats is 40, and the map is just a little bit more filled in, of course with that major victory for Republicans as Marco Rubio is re-elected alongside Ron DeSantis. We're now approaching the 9 p.m. poll closings, as polls will be closing in New York very soon, where we have a very competitive gubernatorial race between Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. However, we do now have a separate projection to make at this hour. In Missouri, we can call the Senate election for Eric Schmidt. He will defeat Trudy Busch Valentine to win his first 6-year term, succeeding Roy Blunt. With a very strong majority, Eric Schmidt is on track to defeating the Democratic nominee in one of the closest races of the year. With 27% of the votes in, Eric Schmidt will defeat Trudy Busch Valentine. And so this will give Republicans 38 seats, 22 seats remain to be called. We're now just 3 hours away from midnight. Polls are closing in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, New York, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. This is the second largest poll closing that we have tonight, and we have very close races to watch in Arizona, Colorado, and Wisconsin. The first race we have in our long list of projections is Iowa. Chuck Grassley is the projected winner and defeats Michael Franken to win an 8th term. This is the smallest margin for Grassley since his first race in 1980, but Franken will still come short of defeating the Republican incumbent. In Kansas, Jeremy Moran is the projected winner, and in Louisiana, John Kennedy, the projected winner. He will return to Washington for another 6 years, winning without a runoff. In North Dakota, John Hoeven is the projected winner to another 6-year term, and so is John Thune. In South Dakota, he is currently the minority whip, second in line in Republican leadership in the Senate, and he'll defeat Brian Banks to win re-election to a 4th full term. While the only Democratic projection we can make at this hour is in New York, where Chuck Schumer is re-elected to a 5th term, and of course currently he is serving as the Senate Majority Leader. And so with this, Republicans have taken the lead with 43 seats, Democrats behind at 41. 17 seats remain to be called. We have a lot more red on that map, but also a lot of states that we cannot make a projection for yet. We have 3 races that we cannot call yet at this hour. The first one is in Arizona. Mark Kelly, the Democratic incumbent, looked like he was locked in to win just a few months ago, but recently Blake Masters has been surging in the polls and is giving Kelly a run for his money. In Colorado, Michael Bennet is running against Joe O'Dea. Even though he is on track to win, we are going to wait a little bit longer just to make sure of that before we make an official projection. And finally, in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson is running for a 3rd term against Mandela Barnes, and this race is also currently too early to call. Polls are now closed in most of the races across the country, but we still don't have a clear picture as to which party is going to come out with the majority in the end. However, we do have some new numbers from some close races that we hope to be able to make projections for very soon. In North Carolina, Sherry Beasley and Ted Budd are in a virtual tie. Beasley is up by just 867 votes, with 69% of the estimated votes in. The election in Tar Heel State is very, very competitive, and we cannot make a projection yet at this hour. In Ohio, J.D. Vance has actually taken the lead against Tim Ryan. He is now up by a margin of 0.8%, with 40% of the estimated votes in, and the numbers for Vance are expected to go up as more Election Day votes are counted. In New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, the Democratic incumbent, has a strong lead over Dawn Bolduc, as 20% of the votes are in. Maggie Hassan leads by 10 points against her Republican challenger. And finally, in Georgia, Herschel Walker has taken the lead against Raphael Warnock and is up by a margin of 0.4%, but not at the 50% mark that he needs to be at to win this race outright. And so currently, Democrats lead in 2 seats currently held by Republicans, while Republicans are up in just 1 seat currently held by a Democrat. And so, of course, Republicans need to pick up at least 1 Democratic-held seat if they want to win the majority, and so far, they have not been able to do that. We've now hit 10 o'clock Eastern Time, which means polls are closing in Nevada and Utah, where we have a major election in the Silver State. It is a must-win for both parties if they want to have a good chance at winning that majority. And in Utah, Mike Lee is defending his seat against independent Evan McMullen. And before we call the race in Utah, we have another major projection to make, and that is in the Buckeye State of Ohio, where we can call the race for J.D. Vance as he defeats Tim Ryan. This is a major victory for Republicans. J.D. Vance will officially succeed Rob Portman with 51.7% of the vote, 68% of the votes in. It's clear that J.D. Vance is going to be elected, defeating Representative Tim Ryan. However, Republicans will also win in Utah, where Mike Lee defeats Evan McMullen, a major victory for Lee, as he was in a tight race against the conservative independent. And so with these two calls, Republicans now expand their lead to 45 seats, Democrats at 41. 14 seats remain to be called, and we still have a lot of white states. Those races we knew were going to be competitive, but they really are going to go down to the wire. However, the election in Ohio has been called as the first major election that we've been able to make a projection in so far. In Nevada, of course, we knew this race was going to be too close a call. Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic incumbent, defending her seat against Republican challenger Adam Laxalt. This is going to be one of the closest races of the year, and a major victory for Laxalt if Republicans can actually win. And currently, this race is too early to call. Masto does have a very slight lead, according to early voting statistics. We're now approaching the 11 p.m. poll closings, where polls will be closing along the West Coast, but we do have a major projection to make at this hour, as well as some updates in some of the closest races of the year. In North Carolina, Ted Budd is the projected winner. We can now officially call this race for Republicans, as Budd is taking the lead with the election day vote. Cheri Beasley has been defeated, and currently Budd leads by around a 5-point margin, with 93% of the votes having been counted. So in the Tar Heel State, Democrats will not flip this seat this year. They've tried very hard over the last decade and have failed to do so. Last time Democrats won a Senate seat in North Carolina was back in 2008, and 2022 looks like it's not going to be their year once again. North Carolina is going to give Republicans their 46th seat, 13 seats remain, and of course, we have another red state on our map. In Georgia, Herschel Walker has taken a commanding lead, but that's with most of the in-person votes having been counted. We have mainly mail-in votes that are left, and that will boost numbers for Raphael Warnock and potentially put Herschel Walker under the 50% mark. In New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan has narrowed her lead against Don Bolduc. Don Bolduc has caught up pretty significantly with 63% of the estimated votes in. It's now a very close election here in the Granite State. And in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson leads over Mandela Barnes. We may be able to call this race soon, as the Johnson's numbers are increasing as more election day votes are tallied. We're now an hour away from midnight and November 9th, and we have our final large poll closing, with polls closing in California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. The only two we have left are in Hawaii and Alaska, with single state poll closings at midnight and 1 a.m. Now, before we make the call in California, we have another major projection to make, and that is in Colorado, where Michael Bennet is projected to win a third term in office, defeating Joe O'Dea, and he'll return to Washington, winning 53% of the vote. Bennet was first appointed in 2009 and will now become a 3-term senator. With 80% of the votes in, Bennet is the projected winner. Democrats will also win in California, where Alex Padilla is re-elected, defeating Mark Newsom. This will be the first full term for Padilla that he will serve until 2029. In Oregon, Ron Wyden is the projected winner, defeating Joe Ray Perkins. And finally, in Idaho, Mike Crapo will win re-election and is the projected winner. And so with these projections, Democrats are up at 44 seats. Republicans have expanded their total to 47. We still have 9 races left to call, of course, in the most competitive states of the year. And currently, we cannot make a projection in Washington either. In Washington, the race is currently too early to call. Patty Murray and Tiffany Smiley are in a very tight race. We do expect Murray to win, but we will wait off on making an official projection just a little bit longer. In Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz leads over John Fetterman, 57% of the votes in, but most of the remaining votes are mail-in ballots that remain to be counted, and of course mail-in ballots were sent to every single Pennsylvania voter without request needed. In Arizona, Mark Kelly leads over Blake Masters, still a very close election, but things are looking good for the Democratic incumbent. And finally, in Nevada, a state that has a reputation for counting its votes very, very slowly, that remains true tonight as Adam Laxalt leads, but with less than 1% of the votes in. And so currently Republicans lead in 2 Democratic-held seats, and they are on track to winning at least 1 Democratic seat. But of course, if John Fetterman defeats Mehmet Oz, they will have to win at least 2 for them to take the majority. And right now, we still have very competitive races in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. Votes are now starting to come in at a steady pace from Nevada, which will be one of the closest races of the year, and if Democrats can hold onto this seat, they will have a much better chance at retaining their majority overall. But Adam Laxalt has been very competitive against Masto in the final weeks, and of course on the gubernatorial level, we also have a very close race between Steve Sisolak and Joe Lombardo. It is now November 9th, it's 12 a.m. on the East Coast, and we have a poll closing in Hawaii, but also 2 other major projections to make in other tight races across the country. After a very tough battle between Hassan and Bolduc, we can project that Maggie Hassan is the winner in New Hampshire. She will win re-election to her second full term with a plurality of the vote. We have 97% of votes having been counted. Those 3% is not going to make up the difference for Bolduc, and so Maggie Hassan is the projected winner in the New Hampshire Senate race. In Hawaii, Brian Schatz is the projected winner and will win re-election to a second term. Patty Murray would also win in Washington. We can now project this race as Murray defeats Tiffany Smiley to win re-election a 5th time. Murray wins with just 53% of the vote, a terrible showing compared to the 18-point margin that she won by just 6 years ago. However, with these 3 projections, the Democrats are now tied with Republicans, both parties at 47 seats each, and we have 6 remaining races in Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Alaska. We have updates but not projections yet from the 5 races that are still too close to call. The first one in Georgia, polls closed here at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so it's been 5 hours and we still cannot call this election. The margin for Walker has decreased significantly since the last time we looked at these results, and with 88% of the votes in, it is looking more and more likely that a runoff is going to occur between Walker and Warnock. In Pennsylvania, John Fetterman has taken the lead with 50% of the vote. This is as more mail-in ballots have been counted. We still have a very close race here. Mehmet Oz is definitely in the battle, but John Fetterman has retaken the lead in the Keystone State. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson leads over Mandela Barnes, and we are close to making a projection here as most of the votes have already been counted. In Arizona, Mark Kelly leads against Blake Masters with a majority of the vote, 77% of the votes in. Masters still has a chance at winning, but Mark Kelly is looking strong at this hour. And finally, in Nevada, we have 79% of the votes now in from Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto leads by a 2-point margin, with all of the mail-in ballots having been counted. And so at this hour, Republicans lead in just 1 Democratic-held seat, and that, of course, is the seat in Georgia, but the Senate is now closer than ever as John Fetterman leads against Mehmet Oz. Although polls are set to close in Alaska in just 5 minutes, our eyes are still on the peach state of Georgia, as almost all of the votes have been counted now, and the race is closer than ever. Herschel Walker is very close to 50%, but he may very well not get to the majority and not be able to avoid an impending runoff. Herschel Walker is really hoping that he does get to that majority, but with Chase Oliver getting a significant chunk of the vote, it does seem unlikely. Polls have now finally closed in Alaska, 1 a.m. Eastern Time. This is the first Alaska Senate election in history to use ranked choice voting, so it'll be interesting to see how well Lisa Murkowski does with this new form of voting. But we also have 2 major projections to make in Wisconsin and Georgia, where vote counting is almost complete. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson is the projected winner, defeating Mandela Barnes to win re-election to a 3rd term. He is the first Republican to win a Biden state from 2020 tonight, at least on the Senate level, and so this is a major victory for the GOP, as Ron Johnson is re-elected with 98% of the votes in. Next up, in Georgia, our official projection is no projection 6 hours after polls first closed. We can project that neither Raphael Warnock or Herschel Walker will win the race tonight. A runoff will be needed as Herschel Walker came short of the 50% that he needed to win, and so Warnock will have another chance at maintaining his seat for the next 6 years. In Alaska, the race is currently too early to call, but Lisa Murkowski and Kelly Tshibaka are the 2 big players, and of course, only the results in the final round of ranked choice voting are going to be what matters. And so with the win for Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, Republicans now take the lead once again with 48 seats. We have just a little bit more red on that map with 5 races remaining, 51 seats for Republicans to take control, just 50 for Democrats because they have the vice presidency. Votes are quickly being counted in Pennsylvania. We're close to making a projection in the Keystone State, but before that, we can now make a projection in the state of Alaska, where Lisa Murkowski is running for re-election against Kelly Tshibaka. In the 49th state, we can project that Lisa Murkowski is the winner, defeating Kelly Tshibaka to win her 4th full term in office. In the first round of ranked choice voting, Tshibaka actually only won 36.5%. However, in the final round, she does come out on top with 52.3% of the vote. Tshibaka's 47.7%. We have 99% of the estimated votes in. And so this will give the GOP their 49th seat, which means the Democrats need to win 3 out of the 4 remaining races if they want to maintain control, while Republicans only need 2. We also have updates in the 3 remaining races as the vote counting starts to come to an end. In Arizona, Mark Kelly still maintains a 0.8% lead with 92% of the estimated votes in. In Nevada, Laxalt has taken the lead and is up by 3 points with 98% of the votes in. We are very close to making a projection here in the Silver State. And finally, in Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz has retaken the lead against John Fetterman with 90% of votes having been counted. After a couple of delays, vote counting has finally finished in Nevada. We are now in the very early hours of the morning here on the East Coast, and we can finally make a projection. Adam Laxalt is the projected winner and will defeat Catherine Cortez Masto, unseating the Democratic incumbent. This is the first pickup of the election so far. It's not even night anymore, it's basically the morning. Adam Laxalt defeats Catherine Cortez Masto with a plurality of the vote, winning by 3.1%. 99% of votes have been counted. This is the first pickup for the GOP. Adam Laxalt is the projected winner, and with 3 seats remaining, Republicans now have 50 Senate seats at the very least, which means they will not do any worse than they did in 2020. We have 2 elections that remain to be called in Arizona and Pennsylvania, now that Georgia will be going to a runoff. In Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz maintains a very narrow margin over John Fetterman with only 6% of the vote that remains to be counted, but Mehmet Oz right now is up by 40,000 votes with over 5 million votes having been cast. The race in Keystone State is tighter than ever, and it will go down to the wire. We have another very close race in Arizona. Blake Masters has taken a 0.1% lead and is ahead of Mark Kelly by 3,000 votes with only 4% of the vote that remains to be counted. It's now well into the midday here on the East Coast, and we've been watching those races in Pennsylvania and Arizona as of vote counting finally comes to an end. And with over 99% of the votes having been counted, we can now make major projections in both of those elections that will determine the balance of power for the next 2 years. In Arizona, we can project that Blake Masters is the projected winner, defeating Mark Kelly, the second flip of the night for Republicans, and enough to give them their 51st seat. Mark Kelly has come up short in his bid for a first full term. A 0.4% margin right now separates Masters and Kelly, only 12,000 votes. Mark Kelly came very close to winning a first full term, but in the end, Blake Masters will defeat him, and this is a major pickup for the GOP, winning a second state that Joe Biden carried in 2020. In Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz is the projected winner. Another victory for Republicans. They're having a very good day. John Fetterman has been defeated by the TV doctor. Mehmet Oz winning 49% of the vote, pluralities in both of these races, but enough for Republicans to win both seats. Mehmet Oz will defeat John Fetterman and be Pat Toomey's direct successor. And so with these 2 projections, we can now also project that Republicans will take back control of the United States Senate. This is a major projection to make as the Senate elections are now finally over. We do still have a race in Georgia, but it's not going to matter. Republicans are going to be in the Senate majority for the next 2 years. And as you can see here, 52 seats with 2 pickups in Arizona and Nevada. We still have 1 seat remaining, and that is the one in Georgia, which will go to a runoff. But Republicans have won 52 seats, more than the 51 that they need for a majority. It's now been almost a month since the midterm elections on the 8th of November. Today is December 6th, and the polls have closed for the Georgia runoff elections, and we can now officially make a projection for the winner of that race. In the Georgia Senate runoff, we can officially project that Herschel Walker is the winner, defeating Raphael Warnock, and this is the 3rd pickup for Republicans this cycle. A major victory for the Trump-endorsed candidate. Herschel Walker will unseat the incumbent Democratic senator, winning a majority of the vote in this second round of voting. We have over 99% of the votes in. A 3rd pickup for the GOP this year. Herschel Walker defeats Raphael Warnock. and so this will give the GOP their 53rd seat, which means they've had 3 pickups this cycle, and the map looks a lot more redder than it did before Republicans flipped seats in Nevada, Arizona, and now Georgia as well, without losing a single one. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below. If you enjoyed it, comment down below which party you think will win the Senate majority this year. This video was in collaboration with US Election Analysis, so make sure you check out his channel and subscribe. The video could not have been done without his amazing work. Subscribe to my channel as well, and I will see you guys tomorrow for my final election night stream.